Good evening, everyone. I'm Mansi Gupta, as team member at Legal Law Forum Nagpur. We at Legal Law Forum endeavor to promote legal education and awareness through various legal educational activities. We believe in encouraging young law students and helping them to resolve the gap between those who come from the legal background and those who do not. Today, we have with us an outstanding advocate, Mr. Jayant Bhatt. I would ask Ms. Pooja, our coordinator today, to introduce him to us.
Thank you, Mansi. Today we have an amazing opportunity to have with us Advocate Jayan Bhatt sir as a guest for today's webinar. Sir Jayan Bhatt is an independent litigator based in New Delhi, India. Sir has completed his masters in law from National University of Singapore and New York University. Sir is a member of Supreme Court Bar Association and Delhi High Court Bar Association. He is a senior panel counsel for Union of India at Honorable Delhi High Court and panel counsel for Oil and Natural Gas Corporation. Today, Sir will enlighten us here on the topic of legitimacy of serving justice through extrajudicial killing encounter. Sir, with your prior permission, can I proceed with the questions?
Absolutely, ma'am.
Sir, the first question. Sir, what are the statutory provisions which provide the law enforcement agencies the power to conduct extrajudicial killings?
So, madam, few things that we have to understand is the moment we say extrajudicial killing, the word extrajudicial in itself means one which is outside the purview of judiciary or as per the mandate of law which is laid down in the country. So, nothing is justified as extrajudicial killing unless in law there are express provisions for it. Just to put the context, into consideration and to make things clear, I must tell you that there is absolutely no provision in law which provides or which authorizes any law enforcement agency to conduct extrajudicial killing. Well, they can adopt a legal defense under Section 100 of the Indian Penal Code, which being short for IPC, which enunciates that the exercise of right of self-defense may be exercised, but it cannot cause the death of somebody else. There has to be a reasonable apprehension in the mind of the person, especially police persons or people authorized by the government, that there exists a threat to life or limb, and that threat has to be immediate. Also, we must note that Honorable Supreme Court, in the case of Extrajudicial Execution Victim Families Association versus Union of India, laid down a distinction that where it has drawn the differentiation between the right of self-defense or private defense and use of excessive force or retaliation, and that the right can be exercised only to defend oneself but not to retaliate. So that is something we have to be very clear about. The other thing which is laid down under the law is Section 46 of Code of Criminal Procedure, which is CRPC in short. It permits a police officer to use all means necessary to effect the arrest of the person. And I will draw your attention to subsection 2 of Section 46 of CRPC, which says that if third person forcibly resists the endeavor to arrest him or attempts to evade the arrest, such police officer or other person may use all means necessary to effect the arrest. Which means if a police person is coming after you in discharging their duty and if you're resisting, then they will arrest you and they will use some extra force, extra power. Similarly, in an encounter situation amounting to murder, exception 3 of section 300 of the Indian Penal Code comes into. It says that when is culpable homicide not amounting to murder by an offender, especially in the case of public servant who is acting in the advancement of public justice. If they exceed the power given to them by law and they cause somebody's death by doing such an act, then in good faith, it has to be lawful, it has to be necessary for the discharge of their duty, and it has to be without ill will. And that is very important because all these things are considered should a matter go to trial or should a probe investigated or put into by the judicial machinery or by the administrative machinery. Also, you must note the case of Supreme Court again in Public Union for Civil Liberties versus Union of India, which says that if the version of the police with respect to the incident in any question are to be true, then there could have been no question of any interference by the court, and nobody can say that the police shall wait till they are shot at. But it is for the police force on the spot to decide when to act, how to act, and where to act. It is not for the court to say how the criminal should be fought. Having said that, encounters and these extrajudicial killings have to be considered, you know, very carefully. Was this a vindictive killing? Was that a vengeance? Or was it actually an extrajudicial killing or a killing in self-defense as this is supposed to be? Another case I will try to bring to your attention is Satyaraj Pondai versus Anvil Raj of the Supreme Court, where the Honorable Supreme Court held that a fair investigation is mandatory under Articles 14, 21, and 39 of the Constitution of India, and that it is not only a constitutional right but a natural right as well. Another case for your audience that I'd like to mark out is Nirmal Singh Kahlon versus State of Punjab, which said that the right of investigation and fair trial is applicable to both the accused and the victim under Article 21 of the Constitution of India. And when we talk of Article 21, it goes on to say that no person shall be deprived of his or her life or personal liberty except according to the procedures established by law, which means that for any fair criminal trial or procedure or killing or judicial killing as you call it should be based on evidence. It should be based on the opportunity or the danger lurking right there. It has to be based on the imminent danger that a police force is, facing at a given moment. So any fake or any staged encounter to empower the police to play the role of a judge or the executioner or the jury themselves leads to a direct violation of Article 21 and as per the procedure prescribed by law. So that has to be, aptly considered and recorded even during an encounter killing or extrajudicial killing.
Thank you for the answer, sir. So the second question, sir, has there been any criminal reforms commission which has given recommendation on how to treat the accused and the convicts?
Yes, madam. In fact, there was a Malimat committee which was formed for the reform of our criminal justice system in 2003. And currently, the union government is considering to revisit the suggestions which were made in this committee. When this committee was formulated, the panel was in the favor of borrowing features from inquisitorial system of investigation as is practiced in other countries such as Germany and France, where a judicial magistrate supervises an investigation. In India, it's only the police which does an investigation and magistrate, only conducts the trial by and large. So the committee recommended that the courts be bestowed with power to summon any person, whether or not listed as a witness for examination if it felt necessary. And a lot of suggestions were, made by this committee, which, as I told you, the government is considering. The first suggestion, which I think you must note, is the right to silence. The panel has recommended that a modification to Article 20 of Clause 3 of the Constitution, it protects the accused from being compelled to be a witness against himself or herself. The committee has suggested that the court be given freedom to question the accused, to elicit any information, or to draw any adverse influence against the accused, in case the latter refuses to answer. The committee also felt that the accused should be required to file a statement to the prosecution, so his or her stand. The other part which the committee recommended and considered was the right of the accused. It said that all the criminal codes which are out in the country should be printed in the regional languages, because India is we have a wide country, we have different languages in every state. Every kilometer you travel, the language changes. So one of the suggestions was at least the regional languages should be included in the schedule of the code, so that the accused person who is arrested by the police knows about his or her rights, and they know how to enforce them. They know who to approach. Where their rights have been denied, etc., etc. Also, in places like remote areas like villages, tehsil, talukas, districts, etc., majority of the accused persons are ignorant of their rights due to the lack of education. And regional language will definitely play a key role in these cases if it can be introduced in a code. The other part which the committee emphasized upon was the presumption of innocence. Now, in India, as a the criminal jurisprudence stands, we have the basic principle of, innocent till proven guilty. And in a criminal trial system, a proof has to be proven beyond any reasonable doubt. So this is a very important crux of our jurisprudence when we say it has to be proven beyond reasonable doubt, that even if any judge has even iota of a doubt in their mind, they should acquit the accused, and they should not convict a person in a criminal case, because then it will be a very unreasonable burden upon the conscience of the judiciary. About police investigation, the Malimat committee said, and it suggested, that the police department must have a separate wing of law and order. It recommended setting up of a national security commission and a state security commission, basically, to improve the quality of investigation and to include other measures, have different superintendent of police in various districts, so that they can maintain crime data, they can organize special squads to deal with organized crimes, and have a team of officers, probing inter or state transitional crimes, which are interstate crimes, and then also setting up a full establishment board to deal with posting, transfers, so on and so forth. Some of this I think have been implemented, some of them still requires to be done. The other thing I think the committee was focused on is the police custody is now limited to 15 days. So if a person is in a police custody, it can keep extended to 15 days subject to the permission of a particular court or the magistrate. Now the committee had suggested it in 2003 that this ought to be extended to 30 days or an additional time of 90 days till the time of filing of charges in case of serious crimes. Because if a person is required to be in police custody for any extra information before they are finally sent to judicial custody, that is something the committee thought would be useful. The other thing and procedure which the committee briefly touched upon was things like dying declaration, where they said, in terms of dying declaration, the confession should be recorded in an audio-visual manner or through a video recording, by which you can have a proper record of those dying declarations, so they cannot be tampered with later, and at the time of trial they can be utilized properly before a court of law. So it helps a judicial probing agency, a police authority also, to help clinch a proper conviction should the need be. So far as the trial procedures were concerned, the Maliamat committee said that in cases where the punishment is 3 years or less prescribed in the penal code and other criminal laws of the country, and they should be these cases where the punishment is 3 years or less should be tried summarily, and punishment awarded in these trials should be capped at 3 years. So far as the sentencing part was concerned, it said the committee is in the favor of the statutory committee to prescribe the sentencing guidelines, and especially when it relates to pregnant women or women with children below 7 years, they can be kept under house arrest instead of being lodged in prison, keeping in mind the welfare and future of not just the women but of their minor child also. So it has considered a lot of facets where the interest of society is involved. That how law has to be even level-headed, and the committee also talked about substituting death sentence with imprisonment for life without commutation or remission. So all these facets were taken into consideration, and it has a very exhaustive report, as I just discussed with you. So maybe if the government currently is considering to revisit these norms, these reforms, the committee report, I think it will be a welcome step to take things forward and have a good overhauling of our criminal justice.
Thank you, sir. Third question. Sir, why are there so many encounters in Uttar Pradesh? 1,100 in last year alone. What do you think is the actual reason behind this? Is it the politics or the actual heat of the crime?
Madam, it depends from state to state. I don't think just to say only one state has a crime rate would be difficult. Maybe the right approach would be to collate the data of every state in the country and see how many crimes have been reported formally. When we say crime, the first thing which comes to our mind is the first information report. So I would encourage you to get the data of all the states and not segregate one state. And the reason for crime are too many. First reason is societal reason. Lack of education, lack of resources, financial resources, and people are grappling with that. So why does crime happen is the biggest question that we have to ask. Is it a crime which is state sponsored? Is it a crime which is business sponsored? Is it a crime which has some other linkages? Is something which has to be delved deeper and probed properly? So I would say let's not just segregate one state and say only this state has crime. And when we talk of crime are of different natures. They can be drug related, they can be arms related, they can be fake currency related, they can be heinous crimes, they can be white collar crimes. There are different categories of crime. So as I suggested, let's have a data which can point us in the right direction, and the other data which has to go hand in hand besides ascertaining how many FIRs have been lodged is to how many false cases were registered. And it's not just because the FIR has been registered, a crime has committed or that crime is right or true. You also have to realize in how many cases were there an acquittal, how many cases was there in conviction, how many cases were lodged because of pusillanimity or grievances, how many cases were a matter of cross FIR. So I think once these details are there at our fingertips, it will be easier, to ascertain which state in the country tops the list of having the highest and the lowest number of crimes issued.
Thank you, sir. So the fourth question. So do you feel that the delay in the delivery system acts as an additional cause for extrajudicial killings.
Madam, there are two, three things. I think of late, at least since last year, few media reports have highlighted extrajudicial killing. One was this Vikas Dubey encounter. One was the encounter of the rape accused in the Andhra Pradesh region, where the lady doctor was brutally raped and murdered. And the police, I will not say encounter, but one police custodial death was case of this father and son, Jairaj and Fenning, which was during the lockdown. So when you see different incidents, they are attached to different public sentiments. But I'm not talking of public sentiments here. I'm saying was the police right in doing what they did? So let's take the first case of the lady doctor who was, raped and murdered, and then in the dead of the night, at about 3 p.m., the police took the accused in an open area in the absence of an eyewitness, and they were gunned down. And the version of the police was they were trying to run away, they were trying to escape, and we had to shoot at them in self-defense. Then comes the case of Jairaj and Fenning, the father and son who were taken into custody and were brutally murdered within the police system. They did not wield any weapon. It was not a case of self-defense, it was a case of police brutality. Then the third incident which again came to media was this Vikas Dubey encounter by the UP police, where they had apprehended a criminal who had gunned down the police officers who had gone to raid his house. But then he was found in Madhya Pradesh, I think. When the moment the UP border was crossed, one of the car toppled and the police was trying to run and this and that, and we had to shoot him, everything. They had their own version. And on this, again, I think the judicial committee has been, I think, constituted. People are looking into it. The idea is one can always find multiple flaws with whatever system we may have. You may find it easy to blame parliamentarians. You can say that the parliaments don't do any job, the ministers don't do anything. You can find fault with the bureaucracy and administration, and you can say they don't work. And you will definitely find fault with the judiciary, saying that our system is very slow. But anybody who works in the system or within the system knows the difficulty which comes with running a system. And I'm not going to talk about parliament and bureaucracy so much, as I'm going to speak about the judiciary. That the judiciary is extremely burdened with a lot of public morality, public sentiment, and a public duty to dispense justice. And when we talk about that, we have to look at the number of judges and people ratio. Let me take the example of highest court of the country, the Honorable Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court has a sanction strength of about 32 judges. We are a population of 1 billion people, and you can do the math. It's nothing. But Supreme Court is the highest court of the country. It's a constitutional court. 30, 40, 50 years ago, matters of utmost constitutional importance used to reach the Supreme Court. Today, every matter from any corner of the country can be made into articles of special petition and can be filed after the Supreme Court. A lot of public interest litigations are being filed, and we have not increased the number of judges. So the burden has increased. Similarly, if you talk of high courts, if you talk of district courts, if you talk of tribunals in the country, some of the tribunals do not have a presiding officer. Many high courts do not have the sanctioned number of strength of the judges that they require. So the pressure on a particular judge to listen to 100 matters, even 200 matters a day is huge. And imagine, tomorrow if you become a judge, you are one individual deciding 100 matters, and then the 100 lawyers arguing cases in front of you in a single day. It can take a mental and an emotional and a physical toll on you as a judge. So we need to increase the number of judges. We need to have a better judicial infrastructure in the country, because till the time we do not have a robust infrastructure, we do not have more number of judges, we'll have people complaining time and again that the system will be slow. However, I think the flip side of the argument, the positive side of the argument is that at least in pandemic and the way things are moving, and I can tell you definitely of Delhi, that virtual courts have become a success, with the start. Today we don't have to run from pillar to post, and most of the lawyer colleagues that I have spoken with, they are very happy. They're sitting at the convenience of their houses, their clients, they themselves, the judges, everybody can be on a platform and on an online platform like this. We can argue our matters, we can do a research online, we can file, our pleadings digitally. So things have definitely moved faster in Corona as we had anticipated. And if the pace is continued with the judiciary, I think in the times to come, this complaint is going to wither away. And judges have taken, the bull by the horn, I would say, and I would congratulate the judiciary that they have taken a wonderful initiative in embracing, digitization of justice system. But yes, I'm talking about Delhi. Outside Delhi, things are not as rosy as they may seem, because There's a bandwidth problem, there is electricity problem, there is a problem of certain, even lawyer bodies or judges also being open to the idea of online hearing. So I think we'll have to train our brethren, we'll have to instill confidence in them so that sitting at the convenience of home and justice, I keep saying this to people, should have a last mile reach and availability. So if a person sitting in any remotest corner of the country who even wants to fight for the justice, that that service should be made available to them. And I think we are moving in the right direction. Even the parliamentary committee report, which has been submitted by the government to the parliament, suggests and very strongly recommends, and was submitted I think 2 3 weeks ago to before Mr. Venkaiah Naidu in Rajya Sabha, that even despite when the corona is behind us, COVID-19 is behind us, we must continue full-fledgedly with these measures of digital hearing online.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So the fifth question, sir, is it the need of the hour to review the Police Act and the Armed Force Special Act to reduce the incidence of extrajudicial killings?
Madam, as I said, look, I always say that we need reforms, and reforms is something like change, and change is constant. So police reforms are required after Act, for the armed forces. Some reforms may also be required, especially now that 370 stands abrogated and other things. But let me give you the other side of the argument. So far as armed forces are concerned, look, when armed forces are working in difficult terrains, in places like Jammu and Kashmir, in Northeast, in other Maoist and Naxalite area, you have to realize that they are up against imminent danger. There may be bomb blasts, there may be mines, there may be RDX and other things. So I would not say it's a matter of extrajudicial killing immediately it comes to mind. It's also about self-defense, as I discussed in my opening comment of question one that you posed. But yes, we must have very robust checks and balances so that whether it be police, whether it be army, nobody should have an absolute power to abuse. And I think that is very important. In any system, where be it police, be it judiciary, be it legislature, there has to be checks and balances. And any power system across the world always works with checks and balances. So yes, reforms are required, reforms are needed. What type of reforms are required and needed is again a matter of a committee being constituted, appointed, and then we'll have to again collate the data. We'll have to see how many of these extrajudicial killings have come to limelight, how many of them were the right killings, as in self-defense, and how many of them were framed or orchestrated. So all that will have to again be decided by committees, by reports, and by inquiries which have already taken place.
Thank you, sir. So the sixth question, sir, has the guidance provided in DK Basu case lost the credibility in the current time? What has actually changed?
Madam, look, it's a celebrated judgment. And as per the mandate of DK Basu, it says the basic rules and regulations should be put in every police station. But the running joke against this judgment, which goes in police station, is one side you see DK Basu strictures being hanged, and the other side the person is being hanged in the thana. तो हिंदी में कहावत है कि एक जगह डीके बासु लटका होता है, दूसरी जगह मुलजिम लटका होता है थाने के अंदर. This is what how the saying goes. And as dark as the truth may be, look, the courts have done their bit by giving a judgment which is reasoned, which says a person should be given a copy of the FIR, the person should be made available of his or her rights upon arrest, and all those things, right? But the court can only do so much. The court cannot put a judge in every police station across the country. That's the role of policing. That's the role of state administration. That is the role of executive or the administrative bit. So court has done its due, and every time the courts realize that the provisions of DK Basu or the basic provisions of criminal due process are being violated, courts always look down upon a violation of this act, and they are taken very strictly and seriously by the court. So I would not say that the courts have lapsed in their duty. I would say the system, which is not courts, have failed, to some extent, the people of this country, which we need to rectify. And that's why I said when you speak of reforms have to be overall. We can't pick and choose reforms. The reform have to take place in a manner by which people like you and I, who are common citizens of the country, feel safe when going to police station. We should not see the high-headedness of the police authorities. They should be trained how to deal with people. And lot many things have to take place, and it's not a one day phenomenon that today I say something in the webinar or the Supreme Court judge may give a judgment and tomorrow it will change. As you said, DK Basu is the best example. Very reasoned judgment. But despite that, on ground, sometimes we see change, and many a times we don't see that much as change. So that has to be an impact which we have to assess and work upon.
Thank you, sir. Seventh question. Sir, was the recent encounter in Hyderabad valid in the eyes of law, considering the facts that there was a huge public celebration and praising for the police? Do you feel that in such situation a conflict is observed between law versus a public demand?
So the public rejoices what they think is moral. It may or may not be legal, and there is always a difference between morality and legality. Now, what the police did in their mind, it may have been right. The killing may not have been extrajudicial, but in self-defense, the public, because the media said, okay, these are the four people who had violated the person of the deceased lady and later killed her. They thought it was justified. But tell me this, we must ask ourselves this question. FIR was lodged. I don't know if the charge sheet was filed in this case or not. There was never a trial. There was not a due process. There was no identification of the accused properly. We do not know how the trial could have gone. I did not even see the face of these four people or the lady who had died, right? So how can today I just blindly believe the police system? And let me remind you, we are talking of the same police, be it Andhra police, be it any state police. If a common citizen is to go to that police station to get a FIR lodged, they will not lodge a FIR. It's not easy in this country to get a FIR lodged. It's a uphill task to one put your complaint, keep following it up, and eventually when the police station doesn't lodge an FIR, you'll end up being in a court and asking them under Section 153 of the RPC to please to request the magistrate to kindly have a FIR registered on the merit of the case. So public rejoices because they find joy in a masala or like a masala movie encounter. And that is a problem because real life is not Bollywood. Real life is much more serious than that. And when we talk of law dispensation system, when we talk of justice delivery system, then we have to look at an overall picture. And the moment we see that the police has transgressed its boundary, then I think a judicial probe is welcome and invited in things like this. So personally speaking, I don't support such act.
Question. So, do you feel that the movies glorify encounters and hence have an effect on the audience psychology, and they feel encounter a better way than trials which delay justice?
I don't think so, madam. I'll tell you why. Look, people watch movie to have an escape from reality. So, if, by and large, most of us are living very normal lives. I would not say boring. I would say normal. But when you watch a movie, they have different genres. They have crime, they have thriller, they have fantasy, they have sci-fi. So many genres are there. But do you think a criminal who is actually running a syndicate will have free time in his hand to watch a movie, or a police person on duty will have the time to look at full screen? That doesn't normally happen. People watch mobile phones when they have free time, spare time. Yes, absolutely. But I don't think today a person who is gainfully employed. I'm not talking of the people who are, let's say, do not get the benefit of good education or maybe are not employed and fall into the crime syndicate. That's a different story. But people who are gainfully employed would watch something like, let's say, like Mirzapur or something like a Dawood Ibrahim Seal or something. So it doesn't mean that okay, this person committed a scam, so I'll also become a gangster. You will watch that series, you'll enjoy it, and then you'll watch the next movie, right? Similarly, when you are doing a policing job, the role of a police is to ensure that there is less and less number of crime within the vicinity of a particular police station or in the area that is operating in the city. Similarly, for a crime syndicate to run, they already know how crime is committed. So they don't need to look into the movies to have new ideas. Movies are made on the real life of these people. So Bollywood is taking inspiration from them. They have already done that. They have been there, done that, and now they are committing an act. So I think that's where the difference lies.
Thank you, sir. So, the last question. So, the fact that our justice system is overloaded and most of the offenders just get through without any punishment or very little punishment, responsible for increase in extrajudicial killing, or it's just the intolerance and impatience of the public towards the law system?
Madam, people are ignorant of the law, and the saying goes that ignorance of law is no excuse. So I don't excuse the public when they say that this system is acting in a particular manner because majority of people have an image of the judiciary. The moment you watch something like Jolly Relby, you will say, okay, these are the type of lawyers who exist in our country. Yes, that's the type of lawyer brethren we have, but that doesn't, define the judiciary by and large. If you go to high courts, even different district courts, even different tribunals, you have excellent number of lawyers doing, a good job for clients day in and day out. Good number of judges, good number of court staff. So it's not all that bad. But ये कहावत होती है ना कि अगर आप बार बार झूठ बोलते हो तो सच लगने लगता है. तो अगर जनता को बताया जाएगा कि जुडिशरी खराब है खराब है खराब, तो लोग हाँ खराब ही है. एंड दैट्स द प्रॉब्लम. सो today, if you give an example, or like the Supreme Court files a mandate giving direction to all the media houses, from today you only pay the judiciary. Then within the next 365 days or 1 year, people will say there is no better system than the judiciary. And I'm not saying this because you do it for the fear of court or contempt of court order, but criticize the judgment if it is not right. Criticism is fine. Even Supreme Court says that you will not fall in the ambit of contempt because the only truth to a contempt conviction is the only defense is the truth. If you are saying the truth, you will not be fined for contempt or defamation also, because both the law are at the same pedestal. But for public to say no, judiciary doesn't work, have you been to the court? Do you realize how burdened a judge is? Do you know how much time it takes for a matter to be assimilated by a lawyer? Say it's the fact from fiction, because if a client comes to me, they will tell me their whole Ramayana and Mahabharata. That's not how the case works. You have to take the pertinent points, look at the law points of it, make a pleading, file it in the court, cure the defense, then it gets listed before the court, and then the judges listen to a matter. And they will have to listen to both the parties before passing judgment. So it's not like trigger happy police which will take the gun out, and shoot people and then say, okay, justice is done. No. In judiciary, there is a proper mechanism. That's why it's called due process of law. So I would say we need to educate people, and I keep telling this to people, through my webinars and through other mediums, that legal education, at least a basic level, should be made mandatory in a school system and in every college department which is out there. Basic one course, how the judiciary functions, or what is the justice system of the country like. So that education has to be imparted to empower people, to make them realize that look, India is one of the countries which has a good law and order in it. We don't have an anarchy system. We still believe in a court system. We still go to court, and courts are always in the limelight in some news channel or the other on a daily basis. So if the system would have crumbled, we would not be having this webinar right now, to be real.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for enlightening us on the topic and helping the viewers scrutinize and understand the topic precisely. It was an absolute honor to have you with us, sir. Now, I would like Mansi to put forth a formal vote of thanks. Over to you, Mansi.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving us an informative coverage on the topic legitimacy of serving justice through extrajudicial killings. In answer question session, you have cleared our doubts on the topic by answering the questions which the viewers had asked. Also, I would like to thank the legal team. They have worked in the background to ensure the smooth flow of this session. So, it was an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you once again.